You are listening to the podcast That's Life in Sweden, or as we say in Swedish, Sånt är livet i Sverige, with me, your host, Lisa Åsimäki. Today, I want to welcome back to the podcast Patrick Blessinger, who is President and Chief Scientist for the International Higher Education Teaching and Learning Association in the United States. He's also an author of several books and articles. He's an instructor of education at the State University of New York at Old Westbury and a licensed New York City public school teacher. Welcome, Patrick. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for inviting me today. I appreciate it.
So have you had a chance to enjoy a bit of a summer break?
Yeah, the weather's been kind of weird here in the New York City area. We had a heat wave a few weeks back. It got almost up to 40 degrees Celsius. But now for the last week, the weather's been cool. So it's kind of been up and down, but I'm enjoying the cooler weather.
Yes, it's always good after when it's been a bit of a heat wave. Here in Sweden, in Göteborg, it was 15 degrees this morning.
15.
1-5. Not nice. It's like autumn. Soon it'll be Christmas and winter.
Yes.
Well, we will just enjoy every day.
Yes.
It is just such a privilege having you join me in this podcast episode, especially since the last time we spoke was in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And the topics...
Yeah, it's always a privilege for me to speak with you. I enjoy doing it.
Oh, thank you.
And I love your podcast.
Oh, fabulous. You know, the topics we then took up was about your role in the Higher Education Teaching and Learning Association. And we spoke about democracy. And of course, I recommend anyone to go to either Spotify or YouTube and listen to both episodes. All you have to do is actually scroll down and look for Patrick Blessinger and the year 2022, and you will find either both podcasts. So to start off with, I'm of course curious what you have been up to since we last spoke. For example, the changing in administration in the US. Can you share in what ways the changes has impacted your work as a teacher?
Well, it's been a lot of changes with the new administration. I was just reading this morning that international tourism to the U.S. is down significantly. I think it mentioned that we're set to lose. It was a Forbes magazine article said we will probably lose about $25 billion in tourist revenue because of the decrease in international travel to the U.S. And they suggested that probably had to do with the current policies and just the feeling of, the whole America First policies that we're currently under. Also, international students is also down to the U.S. So I read an article a few weeks back on, for the same reasons, people in outside the U.S. Feeling uneasy about traveling to the U.S. for either tourism or study. And so I've read other articles where countries are, trying to capitalize on that to pick up those international students. Germany is making an effort to do that. I read an article maybe a year or so ago about how other countries, perhaps it was Norway, and I'm sure it's other countries also, who are making an effort to attract professors who, may for the first time, consider maybe working outside the U.S. So this is having real impacts, As far as how it impacts me. I mean, I work in both K through 12 education and in higher education. It's hard to gauge what the impact is, in those two particular areas, but it's more of just a general climate, atmosphere, and feeling, because now we're kind of have entered an age, I think, of increased isolationism and extreme nationalism, and that has impacts across the board.
So, do you believe democracy is under threat in the U.S.?
Well, a lot of people are saying so, but I tend to be, and I think those are valid, absolutely valid concerns. We've seen a real challenge to even our most cherished, democratic principles and norms. But I'm very hopeful because, in this country, we have a long history. We celebrate next year, we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration. We've gone through nearly 50 presidents, and every, revolution, a global crisis that the world has experienced, that our country has experienced, from slavery to anything else you can think of in terms of human rights movements, women's rights movements, gay rights movements, etc. And we've always become stronger, at the end of the day, because we have a very robust federalist system where power is distributed. We have checks and balances with three separate branches of government that are supposed to check each other. These have come under strain, in some cases tremendous strain, in recent years, but not really unlike previous periods, like during Watergate, the Vietnam War, etc. And we survived. We've made changes. These things fluctuate, in political cycles, and so I'm concerned, but I'm not fearful. I know that the country and the world will become stronger, at the end of the day.
Interesting times we're living under.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So, we have to stay strong. We have to, be secure in our own beliefs and our own view, and our own, democratic values. Stay true to those.
Yes.
And we will see this through.
It's about being resilient.
Yes, resilience.
Yes.
And perseverance.
Yes, absolutely. Now, a lot of things has been happening, of course, and you have written several really interesting articles. And so I'm thinking about asking about one particular article that I found really interesting, and it relates to your article on the rise of the machines. From fear to responsibility. So can you talk about the reason for the article? I think it's very timely. And can you also explain what you mean by a resistance to change?
Yeah. Well, life changes. That's just a reality of life. Okay. And I don't think anyone or any rational person, no matter how conservative they are, no matter how deeply embedded in the status quo they are, no matter how much they benefit from the status quo, I think everyone would agree that change is just an inevitable part of life, not just for humans, but for life in general, for the universe. Everything is in a constant flux of change. Okay, so that's just a reality of life. Okay,
yes,
a self-evident reality of life, and but when change is significant, and palpable. Change is so, so strong that it affects, the way we are, the way we live our lives. Then it can trigger naturally all sorts of reactions and emotions in people. Okay, and so there's a lot of research, a lot of psychological, sociological research on this. It's well, documented and researched, and we've seen this throughout history. Okay, now I won't go too far back. I'll just go back to the Industrial Revolution because that's probably the most significant inflection point over the last 250 years. When that happened, that created a paradigm shift in how society works, how society, functions. We moved from primarily, we started to make the shift primarily from authoritarian based systems. Remember, at the time, there really were no, I guess, what you would call true modern democratic systems as we know them today. Countries were run by kings, by rulers that had complete authority. So that was one thing that kept everything very stable. Okay, because that's what they wanted, right? They wanted it was all about keeping things as they are, so that those who have the power, okay, and are in positions of power can maintain that power. Okay, they don't want change because change, if you're in, if you hold all the power and all the economic resources, you want that to continue, right? Change becomes a threat. Okay, and that's what required revolutions, right, in order to shift the paradigm. One was of course, the Industrial Revolution, but that was sort of a quiet revolution that unfolded over several decades, primarily due to new inventions, steam power, and other inventions and discoveries that literally kind of forced very slowly how economies worked. Okay, so we started to move away from a colonial based system worldwide, away from a mercantile economic system that was also embedded in the whole colonial imperialist type of system. So it sort of forced a change in those areas to move more towards a market, based economic system. And then coincidentally, you had Adam Smith's Wealth of Nation come out in 1776, just, I guess, by pure coincidence, that also described the theoretical and rational underpinnings of this new type of economic system that was emerging, and that helped that along. Then at the same time, you also had the Democratic Revolution. This was more explicit here in America, the American Revolution, and then the French Revolution that started, several years after. So in the late 1700s, you see a movement at the political level, to shift the paradigm away from strict autocratic based governance structures to more democratic based governance structures. And we've seen that unfold, for the last 250 years, to the point now where, we had this conversation last time we met. We got about half the world living in what would, most people consider democratic governments, and the other half, even though many of them claim to be democratic, they're really, probably more authoritarian. So the researchers at the university in Sweden have dubbed that authoritarian democracy or democratic authoritarianism. So it's kind of an odd, mix of the two. but I see it, just as we discussed last time, as sort of an evolutionary phase that a lot of countries are going through. And I'm hopeful, that as we move forward into the coming decades and next century, that these countries will hopefully continue to evolve into more, legitimate, let's say, democratic societies where the people actually, rule and decide, how their country should be and move forward, rather than all that power invested in just, one person or one family, So, you know, uh, when I was writing a book many years ago called Democratizing Higher Education, I looked into all this in preparation for editing the book. So it was myself, along with about a dozen scholars from around the world, talking about how higher education was being, we use the term democratized, that is being opened up to more and more people, moving from an elite or elitist system, as it has been for most of its 800-year history, to a mass higher education system where higher education is being opened up to more and more people, to where we're at now, a universal higher education system where anyone can participate in higher education if they choose to. And that doesn't just mean going to a research university. It could mean going to a college, a technical college, a vocational college, any kind of post-secondary higher learning. And so we're seeing that unfold also, around the world. So, change is inevitable. And but so when I was researching this book, I came to, it occurred to me that in looking at and analyzing all these different theories, history, I try to be a good student of history. I love history and try to learn from the lessons of history. That it seems to me that, I kind of came to this kind of postulate or theorem that those who benefit most from the status quo, enjoying great privileges from the status quo, are probably the least likely to want to change the status quo for obvious reasons, right? Because they benefit from it. But those who do not benefit, much from the status quo, they're probably most likely to want to change the status quo, again, for obvious reasons, because they don't benefit from it or benefit very little from it. So they have an incentive to want to change it, right? So that they can benefit from it. So you see this duality and this tension play out continuously, everywhere, at every level, from the personal level to the group level to institutional level, societal level, international level. And so when change comes about, right, if it's a very small change, most people, if not all people, they can make those adjustments. But if it's a very powerful, strong, radical change, even revolutionary change, then that triggers, as I mentioned earlier, it tends to trigger all sorts of reactions in people, emotional reactions, intellectual reactions, etc. Some people, in the there's a whole body of research around this also, in how technology diffusion works. There are models that have been developed, product life cycle models, diffusion models, etc. And whenever something new comes out, you have what are called the early adopters, okay? They look at it, and these early adopters may tend to embrace, new things that come out, change. And it doesn't have to be just technology, but we're just living in an age right now that most of these changes, seem to be driven by technology, but it's not exclusively, technological changes. And so your early adopters will look at that, figure out, how they can integrate, let's say a new technology like AI, because that's the one that's on the radar screen right now. How they can integrate that into their lives, their personal lives, professional lives, and make use of it and benefit from it, etc. And then you have others who are more suspicious, perhaps because they're not comfortable, or they're dealing with an unknown. Whenever something new comes out, it's an unknown, right? So, and people tend to fear what they don't know. They tend to fear what they don't understand, or they tend to fear what they can't control. And this is almost just common sense, because you don't, if it's unknown or you can't control it, you don't know how it's going to impact your life. It could impact your life for better, but perhaps it could impact your life for the worse, right? Have negative consequences. And so those are kind of the seeds for perhaps, fear in people, deep suspicion, and how all this is going to play out, how it's going to impact their lives. Will it, and then when you come across articles that are more apocalyptic in nature, saying how this particular technology is going to wipe out an entire industry, or eliminate the need for this whole class of jobs, etc., then that just kind of feeds in, to the concerns and the fears that some people may have, and maybe even entice them to be even more resistant, to the new changes, to the point of maybe banning, an entire technology, because, well, we just don't know how it's going to, impact everyone. So let's just cut it off and not, not have anything to do with it. But you see this play out if you look at history, and you can go back, to the agricultural revolution, or more recent to the first agricultural revolution several thousand years ago, to every invention that humans have devised, from writing systems to the printing press to the industrial revolution. There's always, without exception, resistance and even condemnation, of these new technologies. Of course, everyone knows about the Luddites during the Industrial Revolution, where they were afraid that the introduction of automation and machinery on the factory floor was going to displace everyone, throw everyone out of work. And so they resisted that by destroying the machines. And, but, none of those attempts have ever worked. Okay. And they never will work, because change is inevitable, right? It's just part of society, of social, groups and organizations. And people have to adapt. They have to learn how to adapt. And I would challenge anyone, to come up with any new development, any new technology over the last 200 or 300 years, or at any point, that did not elicit, from a segment of society, resistance, or condemnation. But yet, life moves on. And yet, everyone has had to learn to adapt and become resilient, and adapt to those changes, so they can function, in the new realities. I remember, I'm old enough to remember, the development of the computer, right, in the mid to late 70s. and how, there was talk that no one would ever use a personal computer. When the first personal computer came out, there was talk, this is ridiculous. It's a solution without a problem. In other words, no one would, it's a nice gadget, but no one, would ever need or want a computer. Okay. Well, all those prognostications were wrong and misinformed and very myopic, in myopic in view. People don't often know or realize the usefulness of something until they've actually started using it for a while. And then they become more aware. Their awareness of the benefits of it become, start to expand,
Yes.
And then they learn to adapt.
Do you believe that AI and other future technology will replace the work of teachers? Because this is a real worry for teachers.
Yeah. My answer to that is an emphatic no. Okay. I have, I've seen this play out before. I've seen it play out with when the internet came about in the early 90s. Well, actually, the internet has been around since 1969, but it really did not, become part of society until 1995, when the Netscape browser was released, and now people had a more user-friendly way to interface with the internet, because the web is just a graphical user interface that sits on top of the internet. The internet is all the back end and background equipment, routers, switches, etc. That allow the transfer of information from one place to another. But I've seen this play out, when the web/internet really started to gain traction in the mid 90s. There was talk about how it was going to decimate, and some people were very, vocal about this, condemning it. I was going to decimate entire industries, entire professions. There would no longer be a need for newspapers because, people wouldn't, they would get all their information online. There would no longer be a need for magazines and books because they would get all their information online. There would no longer be, and then when social media came about and people started doing their own blogs, etc., then they said, there would no longer be a need for journalists, right? Because and professional writers, because now everyone can do journalism and writing, etc. There would no longer be a need for retail outlets, because now you can shop online and just order everything from Amazon. Okay, none of those prognostications have played out, right? And because they're missing one fundamental piece, is that people's appetites grow. Okay, the pie keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's not like we're working with a fixed pie, okay, and that has to be shared, in smaller and smaller slices as more people start, eating from the pie. That's not how it works. The pie keeps getting bigger with every technological and other innovation and revolution. The pie gets bigger and bigger, and as people start, eating that, their appetites get larger and larger. So now, instead of just waking up in the morning like my parents used to do way back in the day, go to the front doorstep, get the physical newspaper and read it, and that would be the only source, right, of their information and view of the world. Now we have millions of sources of information, and people have learned how to adapt, right?
Yeah. So I want to stop you there and ask you then, but do you see any dangers with the misuse of technology?
Well, that always exists. Yeah, because technology is a tool, right? It's a tool, and the tool is only as good as the person using it or as the person controlling it. Okay. And so that's why with every technology, whether it's computers, local area networks that followed, and then the web that followed after that, and then social media, and we're up to web 5.0 or 4.0 now, just like we're up to in industry 4.0, society 4.0, education 4.0, and we're just now sort of um, 5.0 is starting to merge, but with each generation of a new technology or new development, all these questions arise every time, and we have to develop protocols and rules and policies, and that's exactly what we're doing with AI. So now UNESCO, OECD, and other organizations, virtually every government has produced documentation of policies, guidelines of the ethical use of these technologies. It just now is it's focused on AI. So, and this is something we have to do exactly because it is a tool. A tool is neither inherently good or inherently bad. It's not a hero. It's not a villain. It's just a means, a device to do something. Okay. And of course, humans, whether it's a nuclear power, okay, that nuclear energy can be used to provide electricity for an entire nation, or it can be used to destroy an entire nation if it's used as a nuclear bomb. So, that's why you have to have every society, every group, every organization, even every individual has to have a good ethical value system that guides human behavior and guides how we're going to use these tools and the emerging tools, because they are getting more complex. They are coming with more, I suppose, risk and uncertainty because of the complexity and because of how all these technologies now are not separate. They're starting to merge and converge. Okay. So now we have synthetic, from synthetic biology to synthetic wombs to genetic engineering to there's just hundreds of new technologies that are emerging right now that were unthinkable, unheard of, even a generation ago. That's how fast things are moving. So, the bottom line is that these things are not to be feared. Okay, they are not going to, AI, for example, is not going to eliminate teaching jobs, professor jobs. None of that's going to play out. I'm very confident in saying that. Okay, because because humans are social animals. We're social animals. Okay, and and there are other aspects of that, but no one, for example, would want to sit in their home all day behind a computer, do all their shopping from the computer, do all their reading from a computer, do all their entertainment from a computer. No one wants to be locked up in their home. That's not how humans are wired. That's not how we've evolved over the last 2 million years. We're social. And so we need social engagement. We need schools. If I've worked with children for many years, and I can tell you that they need human guidance. Okay? Very few children are going to have the self-motivation and the self-discipline at that young of an age to be able to teach themselves. They're not going to do it.
Yes.
Okay. You
Yeah.
need adults in their lives to guide them, to teach them, to instill a sense of discipline in them. Okay. And the best way to do that, that we've determined, I mean, there is homeschooling, but that still requires adults, guidance and supervision and teaching. But you have to have a formal structure set up, like a school system, in order to do that. So teaching, is not going away. It will only, I think, get stronger with these new technologies if they're used appropriately with sound pedagogical principles, learning science, human behavior science, everything we know, all the research is out there. So we just have to look at it just like smart boards and every other technology that, that is available to us as a tool. And as such, we have to figure out how to use it appropriately, ethically, and effectively to achieve our, our ultimate goals. And those goals exist with or without technology. And that is, how do we develop critical thinking in students? How do we develop a knowledge base in students across many domains? How do we increase engagement among students in the learning process? And no tool is capable of doing that. Okay, you have to have humans involved in the process. And I think in terms of higher education, it's the same. It's the same thing. I know ever since the early '90s and the internet, especially with the advent and the growth of online universities and non-formal learning platforms like Khan Academy and etc. MIT's OpenCourseWare, okay? All the knowledge of the world, or most of it, is now available for free for anyone with a smartphone, okay?
But then again, there is a gap between those who can afford technology and those who cannot.
Exactly, and that's where private foundations come in. That's where the government comes in. That's where society comes in to make sure that every citizen in the country has access to the internet. I gave a speech at the United Nations, I guess it was several months ago, almost a year ago. I think it was October of last year, on this very topic called digital poverty. And if anyone wants to see the speech, all they got to do is go to my YouTube channel. It's out there. And in that speech, I addressed this very issue, right? And I even went, I even took the further step and made the argument that the internet access is a human right, okay? And I believe that, okay? Because we are so dependent on technology now, especially the internet as a form of communication, like we're doing right now. You're in Sweden, I'm in the United States, okay? And yet we're communicating, as if we're sitting right across from each other, okay? And so this is how important and how fundamental this basic technology, has become. And I think it's, for governments that are and organizations that are forward thinking, that take seriously the idea of having their citizenry, be a part of the 21st century, that we have to make internet access available to everyone, and we can do that, okay? Because because the cost of these technologies has plummeted to such an extent that there's just no reason why everyone shouldn't have basic internet access and be part of the modern world and have access to the world's knowledge, okay? And so, again, if they want more of a deep dive into the argument, they can just go to my YouTube channel and look at the speech. But, look at AI. It's the most powerful, perhaps the most powerful technology that humanity has ever developed. We've only scratched the surface, because when we couple, once they start to really improve quantum computing, and we couple AI with quantum computing, we're going to see this technology, the power of this technology in a way that's even hard to imagine for us now. Okay. And these are inevitable. It's going to happen. Okay. So I think the best thing we can do, in which we are doing, okay, is not to embrace these technologies blindly, okay, to demand that they work on behalf of humanity, okay, that they work for us, we don't work for them, okay, that they serve our needs. And the best way to do that is to make sure that they are programmed appropriately, so they work to meet our needs. The way to do that is to develop protocols and guidelines, which all the major organizations have done now. The documents are online for free. All you have to do is Google them to find them. They give very detailed guidelines and policies on how all these different tools should be developed and how they should be used. For schools, organizations have developed, like UNESCO, the U.S. government, I think under the previous administration, developed guidelines for how AI can be used and should be used, within school systems. And so, we've always done this. There's really nothing new here. We just have to, these technologies are inevitable. Okay. No amount of apocalyptic doomsday scenarios, no amount of, cherry picking particular, features that haven't been fully developed yet and saying, oh, this is why this tool is so terrible because, it's doing this, it's hallucinating, it's, these are terms that, that are used in the AI world when AI systems, large language models like ChatGPT hallucinate. They sycophancy. Of course, a sycophant is someone who sucks up to their boss in order to curry favor with the boss, but it's insincere and unauthentic. And the original versions of ChatGPT and other engines were doing the same thing with, but all of those, and, these, when people point those out, that's actually a good thing, because
absolutely,
it's a good thing because it tells the developers what they need to fix and correct. Okay. And now version 5 of ChatGPT came last week, which has, purportedly, addressed, those issues. So this is just a natural, development cycle. We look at it, we demand that it be better because it's either doing something we don't want it to do, or it's not doing something we want it to do. We keep making improvements, keep continuous improvement.
You mentioned ChatGPT. Do you know one of the most annoying things I have is when I write something and then I have this stupid thing want to change my words. And they come up with these stupid suggestions. Even if they're correct, I don't care. Do not interfere with my writing. Because I think sometimes, I don't know about you, but when I examine today, I can tell when the students are using ChatGPT because guess what? They're not that good of writers.
No.
And so, I'm serious. So there, I think, when I think about teachers, we have a real important job
Absolutely.
to make sure. It's like, if you want to teach students to read and write, hey, let's take them from the basics where they use their hands, physically write their name, write the alphabet, try to understand the different letters, whatever language you're using.
Yeah.
But that's been my experience. The other experience now as a researcher, I sent together with an article to a so-called top journal. The first thing, we received responses because she's American, I'm Australian, and we got a response. And have you used ChatGPT?
Well, yeah, I think,
We were furious. I was furious. I thought, how dare you accuse me of something like that? So look, I get what you're saying, but I think there's a lot more learning to do or to share our learning. And I think it would be, parents would be absolutely do no favor to their children if they don't teach them the basics of something, that then when they look at these symbols or letters or whatever it is, they can at least recognize that.
Right.
Whereas for the moment, it's like, oh, well, what do you want to write about? So you put in a topic and then it spits out, and it can be correct.
Right.
But guess what? It's not. Then if you speak to the person, they cannot really talk about the topic. Now, the other question, because I do believe in the power and benefits of technologies today, whether they're used or robots used in surgeries, or we find our ways in the cities using GPT or learning about a city or country.
Right.
But what do you think? Do you think technology can help us facing the immediate challenges we have today of climate change?
Well, first, I mean, your point is spot on, and I totally agree with you. Because, we work in education, we work with children. I work directly with children from kindergarten to 8th grade primarily, and a strong believer in, you have to equip children, with foundational knowledge and skills. They need to, giving them technology too soon, even well-intentioned or, well-designed, could backfire because they don't have the maturity, and experience perhaps to use them properly. So you have to first build foundational skills. They need to, basic reading, writing, arithmetic. They have to become fluent in those areas, be able to write not just printed text, but script, cursive also, which seems to be a dying art form.
Yes, yes, it is.
But I, very, and I've actually written a poem about that I'll publish soon on LinkedIn. So this is critically important in how we use these technologies, because how we embed them or use them in the learning process, there's lots of variables that are involved, and you can't just throw it in there and without any rigorous thought. Okay.
That's right.
Or in a vacuum, you have to understand pedagogical principles. You have to understand Piaget and stages of development and how the brain develops, from grade to grade. You have to understand all these things, and this is why you have education professors like yourself. This is why you have educators that are required to become licensed and go to school and, learn all of these theories and models and, frameworks, et cetera, so that they understand not just the content. The content's a given, okay? But understand the pedagogy of how to communicate that content depending on, the grade, the subject, the particular student that you're dealing with, and all the his or her background and perhaps learning difficulties or disabilities or problems that are interfering with the learning process. So, it is complex, but not so much that it can't be understood, and
That's right.
and design a system properly. And so, yeah, the technology has a place, but it has to be used appropriately. Again, it's a tool, right?
Yes.
People just keep in mind that it's a tool. It's a tool. It's not a panacea. It never will be a panacea. No technology ever has. But we've seen this play out before, okay? When the web first developed, and now all this information is online. What do you think you had students doing? Not all of them, but some of them. They would,
Yes.
They would copy and paste, okay, and then claim that they wrote it, okay. Then we had to develop tools like Turnitin, et cetera, in order to put a check on that. But then they just Then some of them say, okay, well, I'll just paraphrase. I'll go to this website and just take it and then just change a few words here and there so it doesn't come up on Turnitin, and that will. So it's. We've seen this play out before, and we'll see it play out again, I guarantee you, okay? And so we can't approach these tools with, we can't say, well, they don't work perfectly now, okay? So we're not going to use them at all. No, what you do is...
No.
Yeah, you have to take a look at the tool, what are its potential pedagogical benefits, okay? And how, if at all, could I integrate this into my course or into a program that would actually add learning value, that would enhance the learning, process, perhaps in terms of engagement, or perhaps in terms of, enhancing critical thinking, because now they can explore different theories that maybe the textbook doesn't talk about, okay, but that are relevant. I mean, they're limitless, ways of how you could use this, and it may require, and probably often will require, a redesign of the course. So now, instead of having a 10-page or a 20-page essay, research paper essay that in previous courses accounted for 20 or 30% of the total grade, because that was sort of the cumulative assessment, project, to reevaluate that and say, no, maybe we don't, maybe they'll still do a paper, okay. But given the fact that how easy it is to, maybe produce a paper without really doing a lot of rigorous thinking, is we'll only count it as 5%. And then what we'll do instead is, in one of the sessions where we meet, we'll have the kids come in and we'll spend those 2 hours or those 3 hours where they have to do a written essay in class, okay, without technology, where they actually have to use their brain. And let's see, how much they've really learned, okay?
Exactly.
So we'll give them 5 questions. They have to, each question needs to be, maybe 400 or 500 words long, okay? And so you're up to about 2,000 words, or maybe 2,500 words. That's a half of a book chapter. If they know the material, they should easily be able to do that in 2 to 3 hours.
Absolutely.
Okay? So it requires imagination, just a little imagination, okay? A willingness to be able to adapt your course for the new realities, okay? And I think what, professors and teachers may find is that in doing that, the course may actually be better, It may, because now the students have a real incentive to really learn the material, and not.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
But I'm particularly interested in our current issues in the world, and one of these relate to the climate change.
Oh, right.
And my question was to you, that do you think technology will be able to solve the climate change for us?
Well, I think technology has the potential, okay, to make a significant impact on climate change. However, I don't believe that technology in and of itself will make a big difference, because the hearts and minds of people must change first, okay? Unless people are willing, to accept climate change as a reality, okay? And coincidentally, I just published an article on this a few days ago, where I talk about these issues. And so, we have to do a better job of getting people to accept the reality of climate change. And sometimes facts don't matter. Some people are not convinced by facts, okay, because they are so deeply embedded with a particular ideological viewpoint that no facts is going to convince them, okay? But for other people, perhaps if we present or communicate in a better way, we can, convince more people of the reality of climate change. I think government plays a huge part, because without government intervention, I think all the technology in the world isn't going to matter. If we, continue burning fossil fuels, at the rate we continue to do, is just going to pump more and more methane and carbon dioxide into the air. And once it's in the air, it takes hundreds of years, right? Even if we were to stop using fossil fuels today, and everything was, run on, all electricity was generated by renewable energies, it doesn't mean that the global average temperatures are going to immediately go down. No. They will stay there for a while, probably hundreds of years, because those carbon molecules, those methane molecules, have to go somewhere, right? They have to be, and so there's, and we've researched all this. We've come up with ideas and technologies that can capture the carbon dioxide. Some of them are being implemented right now, and simply store it, okay?
Yes, yes.
And so all those are good. So I think the technology exists now, okay? It's just a matter of political will. It's a matter of people accepting the reality, of the facts of climate change. We have the technology, but technology alone, isn't going to solve the problem.
And that's why we have Greta Thunberg.
What's that?
That's why we have Greta Thunberg.
And what's that?
Greta Thunberg from Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
Fridays. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, thank God for her, because
right.
she is an inspiration for all the young people, and of course, because they have to be able to. I mean, worldwide.
Oh, right.
She
of
would,
course. Of course. Yes.
Yes.
I get it now. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, so the young people, our young people, future leaders, I mean, they are going to have to deal with a lot of our mess that we're leaving behind.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious. So I think, there is definitely a place for technology, and it's like you said, there's a place for it, and there is then that we have to be smart enough. We cannot be naive about technology, or that there are people who are going to misuse it and misrepresent it, But now, I know you will be presenting a keynote in Dubai in December at the Higher Education Teaching and Learning Conference.
Yeah.
Any chance you can share what you will talk about?
Actually, I haven't decided yet.
I think I did this interview too early.
Oh, no, that's okay. I suppose I should be giving it some thought. But no, I haven't decided. I've been spending most of my time working on a keynote I'm giving in Korea in October at the at National University there on the topic of multicentricity. Okay.
Which is what?
Multicentricity is, in the past, you had power centers. They could be political power, economic power, education power, concentrated in just one or two locations. Okay. In the past, it's typically been the U.S., who, exerted the most power in those spheres. Okay. But that's no longer the case. Okay. Now we have multi-centric, multiple centers of powers of influence, in Japan, when it comes to manufacturing, automobiles.
Yep.
In Korea, the same thing, in electronics and automobiles. And China now is taking the world stage in manufacturing, just in terms of education. In K through 12 education, you have Finland, who is, a role model, I suppose, and a center of influence, in that area, as well as South Korea, Japan, and other countries. And this is all part of what I view, as just ongoing development of the democratization process, worldwide, as more countries become more economically developed, politically developed, socially developed, they will start to exert an influence, and they should. We shouldn't have one country or one or two countries exerting all the influence in every sphere. That should be, and it is, becoming more spread out. So my whole talk is on that, how the emerging multicentric world, but I'm framing it in terms of education and the learning society, how multicentrism is helping develop an emerging, learning society worldwide.
Sounds great. So, Patrick, coming to the end of this fabulous conversation, is there anything particular you would like to share that I have not mentioned and is of particular importance to you?
Well, I would just, for all those listening, I would just say, with everything that's happening in the world, politically, economically, socially, technologically, to, not get too stressed out about it, to have, to learn how to be resilient and persevere through changes that may, feel, uncomfortable. Hold true to your convictions and your values, and everything will be okay. At the end of the day, the world, keeps getting better a little bit each day, in spite of, the wars that are happening, the nuclear proliferation, etc. To get involved, and try to make the world a better place.
What a wonderful ending to the podcast. So thank you so much, Patrick, for your time and generosity, sharing your thoughts. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you at the conference in Dubai in December, and to your keynote.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You still haven't thought about it. Okay. Yeah. Listen, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
And you have been listening to the podcast Sånt är livet i Sverige, or in English, That's Life here in Sweden, with me, Lisa Åsimäki. Till next time, take care of yourself and each other. Bye for now.